Happy Friday. Welcome to Max Minutes. We've got an exciting presentation and discussion for us this morning on the state of literacy in Georgia. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to first thank our anchor investors. Without you and our members, we wouldn't be able to do all of the great work that we do, so thank you so much. We've got a few wonderful events coming up next month and in December for Max. So first up will be Max Talks, which is at the Home Depot. That's November 16th, 11:30 to 1:30. That is a lunch program. And this one is at the Home Depot. Then we've got Max Minutes with SHRM Atlanta Trends in HR on November 18th, and then Max Minutes with policy experts Friday, December 9th. And then our Max annual meeting, I believe, is on December 8th. So lots of great things coming up as we kind of round out this year. This morning, I'm excited to introduce Sandeep Gill, Executive Director with Literacy Action, and Joy Hawkins, Executive Director with the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. Sorry, we gave you it might be a promotion, Joy, or it might be a demotion, but we know.
I like it.
So I think everybody in reality is part of workforce development. So we're just expanding the circle and including you in. So with that, I'll let you guys do your presentation. And then if you have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat and we'll have time for Q&A at the end of their presentation.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having us here today. Like Amy introduced us, I'm Sandeep Gill from Literacy Action, and with me we have Joy Hawkins, Executive Director of Governor's Office of Student Achievement. We're here today, as you can see, and I didn't expect this large crowd, but we're excited about the intentions and excitement of knowing more about the state of literacy in Georgia and how it impacts our region overall. On that note, I'll pass it on to Joy. Joy, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. This is so exciting. I think you're in for a treat today. And the reason is I love in my professional life connecting dots. And as Sandeep said, we can't talk about workforce unless we have a literate society. And so the foundational skills are the ability to read and write and do simple math. And so we're in a place in Georgia where we need all hands on deck. And so we're really excited about the presentation this morning and for those online helping us kind of move into action. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you so much. Joy Wilkins, if you can go to the next slide. The best part for today is you guys will hear me say we have two Joys with us today. We have Joy Wilkins and we have Joy Hawkins. So I will be calling their full names, not because I'm mad at them, but because we have to make sure that we follow the protocol. So again, connecting the dots is a big part of what we're doing today. We understand Max is a big collaborative of partners, predominantly of workforce development organizations from local, state level. And also it's a huge network of like-minded partners that provide all kinds of wraparound services to very like-minded audience that all of us serve. When we introduced this idea to Max and to Joy Wilkins a few months ago, they were very welcoming to the idea because I don't think so this is a topic that has ever been discussed or shared with the Max audience. But what we are trying to do today is, connect the dots in such a way where this all makes sense. And at some point in time, I would like for you all to come with me on this journey of what I like to call it a life cycle of human beings, which again, I will not get into the biological part of, what the life cycle is, but more so looking at it from the perspective of childhood, early education, K through 12, adult education, workforce development, leading to economic development. And we're talking about the part that focuses on adult education and early intervention, which is childhood education. So without further ado, again, not sure how many folks on the call today know about Literacy Action, but for those that are new, just want to take a few minutes and introduce who we are and what we do. Literacy Action, our mission is to empower adults with literacy, life, and work skills. And our vision is to break the intergenerational cycle of low literacy and poverty. So we began as a grassroots organization in 1968. Since that time, we have grown. We have included many educational programs such as English as a second language, helping students with their high school education diploma. Work readiness is a big part of the work that we do. Family literacy, which is focused on two-generation approach, financial literacy, and digital literacy, which is, of course, much needed program, of course, since COVID, after COVID, whatever we may call it, because sometimes I still feel the way the new normal operates, digitization has played a big role in the work that we do, regardless of which industry we may be. So one of the major part of the work that we do with our clientele is that at the onset of when we agree to work with them on helping them get to the high school level, digital literacy plays a big part of it. For those that don't know this, we are considered as the largest nonprofit provider of free adult education in this state. We offer classes at our main campus in downtown and at several community partner locations like Goodwill YMCA. On an average, we serve about 400 to 500 adult learners with approximately 1,500 classes. Majority of the time, our students are enrolled in, on an average, 3 to 4 classes with us. So most of the students that we typically serve, and this is also your typical audience in an adult education world, they start reading below a 2nd or a 5th grade level. They're typically unemployed and underemployed, and they live below a poverty level. Majority of our student population, and I'll say at least 80% of those, they earn below $15,000 annually. Now, this is not just Literacy Action population. This is your adult ed population for the most part. And in a typical year, more than 90% of our students are Black and brown, and 70% of those are women. So that should give you an idea of the type of clientele that we serve. And of course, I say this without saying that, since our inception, I think, when this organization was, created, the purpose was to help adults get into the society where they're more functional. However, we've come a long way because that definition of being functional has taken so many different forms and formats. Joy, if we can go to the next slide, please. So this slide over here is why do we do the work that we do? And why are we having this conversation? Why is literacy important? Why is child and adult literacy important? Are they connected? And the answer is yes, they're connected. So this slide has lots of statistics. I wouldn't go through all of them, but I want to give you an idea of where do we stand in our landscape of Georgia and also nationwide when it comes to adult literacy. 1 in 14 adults do not have a high school diploma. 33% live in poverty. For many, not having their high school diploma represents a big barrier to obtaining a stable employment, earning a livable wage, and being able to provide for their families, which I think we all understand the cyclical effect of not having the right education. At the same time, earning a high school diploma is not the only determining educational factor for social and economic outcomes. We all know that. Adults with low literacy and numeracy experience higher level of unemployment, poverty, incarceration, and then typically other adults that are at a medium level of education. And we'll get into what the proficiency level of literacy looks like. One of the policy reports, which was published by Southern Regional Education Board, predicted that 18 million low-skilled workers across the region could be unemployable or stuck in making lower level wages by 2030 if they do not increase their skills. So this number is, of course, shocking for many reasons. But we always say this, with an integrated approach of offering core education alongside elective courses and having a network of partnership that we are now exposed to with Max. And with the help of workforce development partners, there is an opportunity for us to make an impact and help these adult learners get to the next level so they can be part of the talent pipeline. Joy Wilkins, do we wait for questions right now or do we take those at the end?
Hey, Sandeep, it's up to you. Right now, I'm not seeing any in the chat.
Okay.
So thank you for mentioning that. Everyone, as you are listening to Sandeep and to Joy, if you have any questions, go ahead and either post them in the chat or put them in the Q&A and we'll be sure to address them. We do, however, it looks like we have a hand raised from Heather. Heather, if you have a question, do you want to go ahead and put in the chat? Or we could also go ahead and ask you to ask it live. Either way, I'm not sure if that's okay. Heather is putting a question in the chat. She's saying, is ESL grouped in with the cohort of illiteracy?
Yes, it is. So when we say adult education, we're talking about remediation. We're talking about grade level classes. We're talking about English as a second language as well. Yes. You're welcome. You're welcome, Heather.
Yeah.
So again, Joy, thank you for that, because I wanted to take a minute to see if anybody has any questions, because this slide has lots of information. And I also want to put it out there that the statistics that you will hear from Joy and me and on this PowerPoint deck, it has been pulled from several resources. It's been pulled from the National Bureau of Economic Research. As you can see, it has been pulled from a Coalition of Adult Education. It's from Technical College System of Georgia, Barbara Bush Foundations, Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank. So several resources we have used to bring this critical information to you. Joy, next slide, please.
Sandeep,
So,
one
yes.
quick question on the last slide. I was just curious, when it showed that 13% of Georgians are living in poverty, do you know what percentage of those people are struggling with literacy?
Yes. So that when we say 13% of those are living under poverty, majority of them are struggling with literacy as well. That's where specifically this number is focused on. Thank you, Amy. So this slide here, I gave you a little bit of perspective of where Georgia is, but this is a bigger slide. This is a bigger platform here that shows you if we don't focus on adult literacy early on, and we don't have innovative and integrated programs to support adults with education, we know we just talked about they cannot be part of the talent pipeline. That means they're not contributing towards the tax base. We're talking about economic development, not just for a few regions, but we're talking about economic development at a higher level. So look at the impact over here. Again, this slide has lots of numbers on it. Take the time to review. But for many of you who are probably thinking, well, do I really care about low literacy? Yes, you should. Literacy is everybody's business. It is costing us US about $2.2 trillion a year. And according to US Department of Education, 54% of US adults in the age group of 16 to 74 years, about 130 million people lack proficiency in literacy, reading below the equivalent of what's defined as a 6th grade level. Shocking number for many reasons, and I bet you its implication on the dollar amount and the burden on the economy is absolutely huge. And we also know it correlates with several other important factors and outcomes, like we just talked about: personal income, employment levels. Also, one of the statistics that I want to point out, which I think we saw it on the first slide, according to the National Center for Education Statistics, about 4 out of 5 US adults, which is 79%, have medium to high English language, English literacy skills. This means that about 1 in 5 US adults, which is 21%, have low literacy skills, translating to this big number that you're seeing on the screen, which is 43 million adults. So when you look at things from Georgia's perspective and a bigger landscape, it has a huge impact. It has a big impact. And I want to take it to the next level and break it down. What is the percentage of this 43 million people that we're talking about? Of this group who have low literacy, 35% are white, 23% are Black, 34% are Hispanic, and 8% are from different races and ethnicities. So again, absorb this information that's on the screen after the presentation is over, the session is over. I think Joy Wilkins is planning to send this out to everybody, but review this information. It is important. Now, I will also want to take it to the next level and talk about some of the states that have higher literacy rates and some states that have low literacy rates. And take any guesses if you have. States like New Hampshire, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, they have high literacy rates. States with low literacy are like California, 76.9%, which means 23.1% of adults lack basic literacy skills. Now, where do you think Georgia stands? We are at 83.3%. So we still have some work to do. We still definitely have some work to do. Joy, next slide, please. And I can pause if there are any questions. I saw something come through the chat.
I think we're okay right now, Sandeep.
Okay.
I'll turn the
Perfect.
video on if somebody has a question.
So again, this slide also has lots of good information. In Georgia, 1 in 6 adults reads at or below a 6th grade level, which is what our typical audience is that we serve. Big concern, we know, because low literate adults experience higher unemployment, poverty, hospitalization. We've talked about all of that. Also in the Metro Atlanta area, 1 in 10 adults do not have high school diploma, a significant barrier to obtaining a stable employment and providing for their family. We also know income and employment disparity for uneducated and undereducated adults increases extremely among women, immigrants, people of color. One of the most troubling statistics that we, again, talk among, the literacy peer group all the time is that it impacts the next generation. 72% of children of low literate adults go on to read below a grade level themselves, which hence perpetuates the intergenerational cycle of low literacy and poverty. So another big concern, and I want to take a step back and talk about this other statistic that I had given before, that 1 in 10 adults in Georgia do not have a high school diploma. And this also came out as part of the Barbara Bush study. By 2024, 80% of all jobs will require folks to have high school diploma. Big concern. Is Georgia ready for it? We're not there yet, but we can be there collectively. Joy, next slide. So not as many statistics, but this should give you an idea of unemployment rate by educational attainment based on the age group. We strongly believe that the ability to read and write are fundamental building blocks for success for every learner, and everybody deserves the basic right of education. I think there's a problem which can be solved with the help of collaborative partnership at all levels. We always say this, that there's a mismatch in the economy where many employers can't find the right workers with the right skills. But yet there are millions of workers we know that are stuck in low-paying jobs with limited potential. We also know that many believe that technology is the answer and is taking over some of these entry to mid-level jobs. So what we have to keep in mind is, and we have to believe in the fact that helping the roughly 130 million Americans that are low literate is also a solution to fill those mid-level to higher level jobs as well. So I just wanted to share this statistics, because when you look at less than a high school diploma and you look at the numbers for September 2022, it is 7.1. A lot of people may say unemployment is low at this time. It is, but when you look at this group, and specifically based on their education attainment, this number is still concerning to some extent. Next slide, please. So what happens when our workforce is not prepared? What happens when Fortune 5 industries and corporations are looking at Georgia to make their home, but they realize there's just not enough strong workforce to fill in their entry-level jobs, mid-level jobs, and those kind of things. So this slide really identifies the labor market outcomes by educational attainment. And you can see low education results in low income level, which leads to dependence on welfare system, going back to that $2.2 trillion impact on our economy. So this is a major concern. While we're on this slide, I want to take a slightly different direction. Certainly don't want to bog down into the detail of the different levels of proficiency when it comes to literacy. This is also published in the Barbara Bush Foundation's new study on the national literacy. The average annual income of an adult with level 0 or literacy level 1, which is basic literacy level in proficiency, is just over $34,000, which is equivalent to earning a minimum wage. If they move to level 2, which is higher than the first level, they're still considered below literacy. At that point, the average income increases to $48,000. And at level 3 proficiency, it is increased to $63,000. So as you can see, every level could be equated to a grade level as well, or 2 grade levels. And every level makes a difference in terms of its impact on the economy. Next slide, please. So what can we do to support our low literate workers? Without intervention, Georgia's workforce and economy will be negatively impacted. The fact is, more people are affected, as we know, by low literacy in the United States than I know for sure are diagnosed with cancer and with heart diseases. And there are multi-generational economic and health consequences for literacy crisis. So here are some strategies on how we can support our low literate workers. These are some of the strategies that we also looked at information from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, from some of our key partners. But the workforce development partners that are here, they can probably relate to many of these strategies. When you look at sector strategies, when you look at work-based learning strategies, on-the-job training, internships, or apprenticeship models, which are earn while you learn. So I think end of the day, I believe the state is doing great work. I think what we need is a better collaboration between the adult education and workforce development system. Because majority of these workers, like I said, their trajectory is long in terms of gaining their high school diploma. You can imagine somebody that is coming to an adult education organization and that is reading at a 3rd grade level. It could take them more than 6 months to get their high school diploma. And one of the practices that I know Technical College System of Georgia has implemented recently is dual enrolling students into vocational training and post-secondary training while they're simultaneously trying to complete their high school diploma with organizations like us and with the other adult education providers. So these are just some strategies, but again, we have to be able to work in a collective environment to be able to take them to the next level, because these can work. These can definitely work. And because we want to make sure that the low literate workforce is not sitting on the sidelines, but they become part of the human capital program. Next slide, please. So, next slide is more so about, connecting the dots. And this is where, I'm going to ask Joy to chime in after this. Lots of information, great information on this slide. It showcases that low literacy is a multi-generational issue. And this chart is a true depiction of what a vicious cycle of low literacy looks like. So early childhood, early intervention could be the most effective approach to increasing literacy skills in the long term. I think we have heard from many research and many folks in the industry that the child learns early on with the brain development, which we know occurs in the first few years of their life. From schooling is when the things begin for them. So when we impact the system of literacy early on, we know that we won't have the issue of adult literacy. Now, I will say this, I'm not going to use this concept, but this concept is used pretty much in every industry. We say garbage in and garbage out. And by no means I'm saying, I'm relating human life or educational journey of human beings to that. But when we don't invest in education early on, we see the repercussions, we see the impact on the economy in the long run, and we are burdened with that $2.2 trillion impact. So again, on this note, I'm going to pass it on to Joy so she can help us connect the dots, while I was able to hopefully take you through the journey of adult education and its impact on Georgia and its workforce. Joy will be able to connect the dots why early intervention is important. Joy, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep. Wow. It's just mind-boggling, the statistics that you showed us. And the thing that I wrote down that I have not heard before is that 72% of those who have low literate parents are also low literate. I'm saying that again because that's important to this last slide. It is a cycle. It is a multi-generational problem. And very much like poverty is a cycle, low literacy is the very same. And so when people ask, well, so if you were going to spend some additional dollars, would it be on the front end or the back end? And my response is always both. I mean, you cannot look at low literacy with adults without looking at early interventions. And so, Sandeep, I do appreciate all of these slides. What I'm going to do is really drill down on Georgia. Before I do that, let me just introduce the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, which has now been changed to Workforce Development, which is actually a nice segue into what we're talking about today, because it all leads to all of the student achievement that happens in Georgia leads to a strong workforce that leads to a strong economy. And every community in Georgia is concerned about their economic status. And having that pipeline of workers who are ready when an employer is ready to come into those communities. So Joy Hawkins, next slide, please. So the mission of the Governor's Office of Student Achievement is accountability and transparency through strategic data use and collaboration with education stakeholders to advance student achievement. We worked on this mission statement for a couple of years, but I like the way that we fine-tuned it. We're all about partnerships and collaboration. We know that no one agency can do anything alone. And so this office was created in 2003 under Governor Perdue. So we'll be celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. At current time, we have programs and responsibilities with a real vast areas of student achievement, but also data collection. So one of the things that we're most proud of is our longitudinal data system, which includes workforce. So it's called Georgia Awards. And we just recently were able to gain the Department of Labor's workforce information. This longitudinal data system was established after 20 years and $20 million of back and forth. We finally got it together when Georgia received the Race to the Top money back in the 2009-10 timeframe. So it's a very robust system. We have teacher training and educational professional development through the Governor's School Leadership Academy. It's in its 5th year and going strong throughout Georgia. Growing readers is what I really want to talk about as far as our agency. We're in the 7th year of evaluation. This is instruction for K through 3rd grade teachers on how to teach young children the tenets of the science of reading. So if there are educators online, you probably know that most schools of ed do not teach teachers how to instruct reading. And so this has been a very strong program and much needed throughout Georgia. Back in 2019, we were able to expand that program with partnership with the Georgia Department of Education that put $2 million of federal funds in so that we can address the lowest performing schools as well as others in Georgia. And then we also host the Governor's Honors Program, which legislators say probably the most popular program in Georgia. We're very proud of that program. We're celebrating 60 years this year. And we are hosting that program at Georgia Southern beginning in 2023. We also have other statutory responsibilities, including the assessments, milestones and end of grade assessments. We did the audits for those. And for those who remember the Atlanta Public Schools debacle back in the 2009-10 timeframe, that was why that statutory responsibility went to us. Next slide, Joy. And so again, focusing on Georgia, back in 2017, Deloitte conducted research and produced a report called The State of Literacy in Georgia. And what they said was, without intervention, Georgia's truly facing a crisis. As Sandeep mentioned, 1 in 6 adults in Georgia possess low literacy skills. And you know, I'm going to say that again because, you know, it's interesting that, I mean, I think when you look around, like, you know, the grocery store is sort of my beta, where you look around and you go, 1 in 6 is actually low literate. And most of these adults really cover it up well. Low literacy costs Georgia $1.3 billion, as Sandeep mentioned, in social services, penal costs, and healthcare. And then we know for a fact that if you don't have those basic literacy skills, you're going to make less than your equivalent high school diploma person. And what the estimate is like $10,000 per year. I want to mention something from the last slide and keep that connection going with the generational approach. Georgia has invested a lot of time and resources in the last decade on approaching issues from a 2-generational approach. And I give credit to our partners at DeKalb, Department of Early Care and Learning, because a decade ago, they worked with Aspen Institute and brought the 2-gen approach to Georgia. It really makes so much sense. And so what we have done since that time is the Georgia Children's Cabinet has adopted a 2-gen approach as one of its 5 goals. We have also just launched a 2-gen academy for public policy folks in state government to on the director level to really help people in Georgia, service level people, understand that if you're working with adults, you can't dismiss the other side, which are the children. And so one of our employees, Trevor Kaysen, is one of the first inductees, and he works with our Governor's Honors Program. And I reminded him that while you're working with junior and seniors from high school, you're also working with their parents. And so, almost everything we do has that two-gen approach. Next slide. Okay, so this is interesting. And so what happened in 2020? There was something called the pandemic. So you can see in 2019, we had actually made some gains over the last decade. So 73% of our third grade students were reading at or above grade level. And so in 2020, you can see that reduction. So many students went online, so many students didn't have online capacity and really probably didn't read during that time, and certainly didn't have the intense instruction of a school setting. And then in 2021, we started gaining some percentage points back, but our real focus now is moving forward. It's going to have to be all hands on deck. And what I don't want any of us to come away from this presentation today thinking is that our K-12 system is responsible for all of this. As we all know, early learning starts at birth. And so we really need to talk about the need to talk and read to young children from birth on. Those words make a difference, and they make a difference on kindergarten readiness all the way to third grade proficiency. Joy, next slide. And so I just took a scan from the Department of Education's recent, this is from the spring 2022. It's end of grade assessments for reading. And you can see that in Georgia, we have 36% of our youngsters who are not reading proficiently at the end of third grade. And what's more disturbing is fourth grade, 44%. And so in the next slide, I'm going to talk about, you are learning to read up till the end of third grade, but after that, you're reading to learn. And so if a child, for whatever reason, has not had the ability to read proficiently before hitting fourth grade, you can see why those low literate students are more likely to drop out of high school. How frustrating must it be to go into fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade and you're faced with comprehension and math equations that are in writing in almost every subject. And so you can see all the way to eighth grade where we are in Georgia. Next slide, please. As I said, until third grade, students are learning to read. After, they're reading to learn. Low literacy at the end of third grade has serious consequences. And, we can't say this enough because third grade is kind of magical. And there's been a lot of research about this, but much more likely to drop out of high school and think about the consequences thereafter. More likely to live in poverty for the rest of their lives, have poor health, and maybe even be incarcerated along the way. And so it's very important to understand that it begins early, and we've got to hit them before make sure that they're proficient by the end of third grade. And if not, in strategic and intentional interventions to make sure that that student can read to learn after third grade. Thank you, Joy. Next slide. So as I mentioned, Georgia's, when you look at all of the work that's being done in Georgia, and these are just Georgia specific, there are numerous nonprofits who are also working on any number of issues related to low literacy, either from the early side or the adult side. And I would have to say there are tons more on the early side. But just looking at the scan, I mentioned Get Georgia Reading. That's a partnership with the Family Connection Partnership that has been around since about 2007, I believe. Really looking at the pillars that make a difference in language and literacy. And so they have been working in communities throughout Georgia. The Georgia Literacy Coordinating Council is new since 2019, when Governor Kemp came in, and one of his main priorities was increasing our literacy skills, because he knows that there's such a link between the foundational literacy skills and workforce and our economy. And so the Georgia Department of Education and GOSA came together. We are now co-chairs of the Literacy Coordinating Council. Sandeep serves on that council. And actually the last meeting was focused on adult literacy. That's the reason we're here today. We had a very robust conversation about, the connection with adult literacy and the workforce. You cannot disconnect those elements. The Georgia Department of Education has now had 3 L4GA grants. Those are federal grants and a lot of money. What's happening throughout Georgia and different communities is those awardees are using this additional funding to create true community collaboratives. And when I say a community collaborative, I'm not talking about just K through 12 or the TCSG or nonprofits. I'm talking about public safety, I'm talking about healthcare, talking about political leaders. They all have a role in the work of the community to improve literacy from birth to adults. The TCSG, Technical College System of Georgia, as some of you may not know, there are free adult education programs to get the GED, to have a certified literate community. That's another program at TCSG, which is community-based and a collaborative. I mentioned the many 2-gen approaches that the state of Georgia is working on. Those all came about through grants of DeCal and the partnership with DeCal and TCSG. I want to share this kind of example so that you have a visual. When adults go back to get their education, can you imagine having dropped out of high school, so you don't like school, and now you're entering another higher education institute? What TCSG and DeCal has done through their 2-gen grants, is they've established adult ambassadors at some of the colleges. And the role of these ambassadors is to help these adult students navigate, understand what's available, connect to classes and instructors, and to fashion instruction schedules that meet their work needs and their family needs. So what TCSG would tell you is that most adults don't drop out of their programs, they stop out for lack of childcare, lack of transportation, because of work schedules. And so TCSG and Literacy Action work hand in glove in many of these programs. And then I mentioned Growing Readers, which is hosted at GOSA. The Sandra Dill Center for Language and Literacy was established in 2018. And they are housed at the Georgia College and State University down in Milledgeville. They are doing a fantastic job of really capturing the elements of early literacy that are evidence-based and practicing those in communities throughout Georgia through grants. And then the final thing that I want to mention, and this is not to be taken lightly is the University of Georgia is now engaging their schools of ed in teacher training with literacy. Senate Bill 88, governor's bill from 2 years ago, required the university system to Georgia to do that, but they had already established pilots throughout the state. And so what that means is we are training these new teachers on the 5 tenets of the science of reading so that they can come into a classroom and actually instruct young children in the right way, in the evidence-based way. So next slide, Joy. So the most recent thing that has occurred is during the last session, House Resolution 650 passed, which created the House Study Committee on Literacy. This week, we met for the first time. GOSA, Georgia Department of Education, DOE, the Sandeep Gill Center, Malcolm Mitchell. There's a cast of individuals who serve on this committee. We had a very good and robust conversation on Monday about birth through adult low literacy. That's recorded. You can find it on the House website. We have a link here to the House resolution. We are supposed to come up with recommendations by December 1, but the chair of the committee, Dubnik, said in this meeting that he's working with the speaker to extend that deadline because this subject and this issue is so important to Georgia. So we will meet again in the next 30 days. I will tell you that in my professional life working around education and literacy issues, I believe that we are at a place where we have a perfect storm. We have our education leaders and our governor and our House and Senate members really understanding, maybe for the first time, just how important this issue is. And it is a birth to adult issue. It's not one or the other. It's a 2-gen issue, multi-generational. So next slide. And so we need your help. Everyone on this call today, we need your help. And as I mentioned, in these communities where they're truly collaborating, every individual has a role. Every professional, every business has a role. It's a complex issue. There are many, many reasons adults wind up in the place they are as low literate. It could be that they grew up in a house without books. It could be because there are 73% of those who grew up in a house with low literate parents. It could be because they had an undetected disability like dyslexia. So there are many, many reasons, but I'll tell you the reason that I've heard, and I want to just address this. No adult chooses to have low literate skills. They don't choose that. And so I think that any way that we can lift up these adults to go back and to get those skills through literacy action, TCSG, free of charge, we should be encouraging. We should encourage young mothers to read to their children, talk. Words are important. Ensure that our children are proficient by 3rd grade. Ensure that we have graduates. As Sandeep mentioned, SRAB came out with a newer study in 2020 that compressed that time frame from 2030 to 2025. We need those adults with foundational literacy skills because our hospitality industry is going away and being replaced with robotics and AI. We need to establish sustainable systems to support and build capacity. We need strong partnerships with our local workforce development system for post-secondary opportunities for all eligible adults. That's our human capital investment, such a strong investment. And finally, I will say this again, encourage collaborations in your communities. Every community owns literacy, and every community is concerned about their own economy. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Joy Wilkins or to Amy.
Joy, thank you so much. I just want to say one more thing, thank you for connecting the dots and really bringing this whole conversation to full circle and emphasizing the importance of investing in early intervention strategies. I think we just heard, and we have to continue to keep talking about it and not stop at the conversation that we just had today. Developing literacy and language skills before formal schooling sets a child up for success in school and life. And like Joy mentioned, children with poor foundation in literacy before entering a formal school system are more likely to struggle. They are to drop out, which leads to, of course, poor employment and socioeconomic outcomes as well. So again, there is more work to do. And also know that the states and regions that are hardest hit by low literacy are southern states, metro areas, and community with significant or major African American and Hispanic populations. So without literate communities, we cannot have equitable communities. I know we continue to talk about, and there's a lot of discussion in the Metro Atlanta landscape about economic mobility. We're struggling in our homes here. We are struggling in Atlanta, Georgia for economic mobility. Addressing the national challenge requires a broad coalition of willing partners, corporations, I'll say government agencies, nonprofit, partners, and educators. So this is, like Joy said, this is not one person's job. This is everybody's job. Literacy and education is everybody's business. So I'll stop at that because I know we are almost running out of time as well. But Joy Hawkins, thank you so much for joining me today and helping, sort of kind of paint the picture that we have a dire need. We have a problem that we have to solve collectively. On that note, I'm happy to pass it on back to Amy and to Joy Wilkins. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you both. This was fabulous. And Sandeep, like you said, there's a steep hill to climb, but I feel like we have a clear path to positive outcomes, right? And sometimes in workforce development, I know it takes a lot of different levers to push, but this is a significant lever that we can scale some of those positive outcomes by just increasing literacy. So thank you for that. I did have a couple of questions, and if you do have questions, please put them in the chat. I know we just have about 4 or 5 minutes left, but I really appreciated the data. Joy, the Georgia Awards data, I'm a big fan of that, but I did have a couple of questions for both of you. One, Joy, on the Milestones data that you shared, I'm just curious, it shows like the students weren't progressing through COVID in their reading on grade level. Is that an indication of just they progressed up to the next grade level, but their reading skills kind of stayed flat? Or is it a piece where, kind of like with any muscle, if you're not using it regularly, does it decline from where you were?
Yeah, I think there are multiple reasons. I think that, there are students who live in places with no broadband. And so literally teachers were packaging homework and driving them around rural areas. There were so many things to overcome, and just to get accustomed to doing online work. Our high school students transitioned pretty well. I think it's the younger students who had a harder time. And look, I know many people who were working at home and also trying to tutor their students and make sure that they were online learning. And so I think that it was a whole package of consequences that paralleled the pandemic. And I think our job now is just to ensure that we have intentional interventions to make sure that these students are reading on grade level as they progress.
Thank you. And Sandeep, I know you talked briefly, and Joy, you mentioned this too, like the cost of lack of literacy on kind of the supports that the state provides. Do you have, just at a high level, what the cost of reduced earnings based on that literacy to the state as well? Like there's a second kind of cost
So,
Right.
Amy, good question. I think we'll have to look at those
right.
statistics, what that number looks like, but certainly we can connect with our TCSU partners to get that cost. But again, I think we saw the bigger impact of $2.2 trillion. And I think when you break it down, I think, Joy, you may have pointed this out in your part of the deck. I think we said $1.3 billion right here at home. So I think that impact is definitely quite drastic if early intervention strategies or catching folks where they are and helping them with the collaborative partnership, I think is really the big solution for this deal. But Amy, we're happy to sort of kind of connect with our TCSG partners and find that data for you guys.
I just
That's
think
a great question. Mhm.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then Wendy put in the chat, can you repeat the data regarding adult Hispanics and low literacy in Georgia?
Is it, are we talking about the breakdown of percentages in terms of ethnicities? So I think that was 35%. Yes, I'm happy to drop that. Yes.
And Sandy, was that national or was that state of Georgia?
I think that one was specifically national. And we'll get the Georgia numbers as well.
Thank you both. This has been insightful and, while daunting, encouraging at the same time. There's a lot of joy. You talked about so many of the partnerships working together, and that's key to workforce, right? It's like, how do we help supply and change literacy? We have to work together because it's not just about attending a class, right? That individuals are trying to navigate. So thank you both. This has been a great session. We've kept people on for a long time throughout this session. So that's a good sign that people are definitely into the topic. So thank you for joining us today. For the as we close out, just a reminder, we do have a few more events again. November 18th or November 16th is the next Max Talks at the Home Depot. And then we've got a couple of other items coming up. November 18th is the next Max Minutes, where we'll talk with policy experts about the 2023 legislative preview. Looking forward to that one. And then, and that's on December 9th. So check your Max Monday email for all the great Max stuff that's coming, and hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful weekend. Thank you, everybody.